You ever have that moment where you walk into an event and you get all settled and you look down and you realize you didn't bring your reading glasses? So we will make it through, no problem. So good morning, everyone. I'm Phil Hansen. I'm the president of Global Minnesota. I am so pleased to welcome you here to our SDG Roundtable Resiliency in a Water-Challenged World. We have a great program. I think over 200 participants now, both in the room and online with us today. Really excited to have this group together. I particularly want to welcome Global Minnesota corporate and individual members that are in the room with us today. And I also want to welcome members of our diplomatic corps that are here as well. Elaine Kumpula, the Honorary Consul of Finland, is here with us today. Jan Bauer, the Consul of the United Kingdom. Mark Aal, the Honorary Consul of the Netherlands. Carl Pilan, the Trade Commissioner for the Consulate of Canada, are all joining us in the program today, and we're just very thankful to have you guys involved with us as well. We also got to give a very special welcome to a high school teacher who's with us today, Missy Beam, and her students from Minnetonka High School. It's great to have them joining us in the program. Let's give them a round of applause for coming and being a part of the program with us today. Thank you. I also want to welcome Global Minnesota board members that may be with us in the room as well. We appreciate you joining us here today in the program too. I also want to share my appreciation to those who made the program possible today. Of course, we want to say thank you to our corporate member Cargill, especially to Katie Clark-Steven, to JB Sherpoltz, for your ongoing partnership and your ongoing support. It's been a great team to work with, and we're just so appreciative of the opportunity to extend our reach through great partners that make it possible for us to have a bigger connection to the community. I also want to thank the subject matter experts that are here from Cargill, from Uponor, from Ultra Senexin, that are going to be speaking to you later. So it's just great to have you with us as part of the program today. All right. A little slide there for you. So just a little bit about Global Minnesota. Some of you may not be super familiar with us. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan, membership-based organization dedicated to advancing international engagement and understanding. Our programs do a lot of things for people in the community. We're here to expand international educational outreach. We're here to promote global cultural exchange and also build global competence amongst people that participate with us. We're here to encourage informed discussion on international issues as an organization. We're also here to enhance economic opportunity and really try to help continue to build Minnesota's global reputation and visibility across the world. Part of our work is to advance global sustainability best practices, and that's the program we're talking about today. And we're also supporting citizen diplomacy. And very importantly, we're here to inspire and help prepare Minnesota's next generation of international leaders like the students that are joining us in the room today. Last year, just to give you a sense of scope of the organization, we hosted nearly 50 professional exchange delegations with participants from 130 countries here in Minnesota. We delivered or supported over 400 World Affairs programs, events, and activities featuring visiting diplomats, ambassadors, and foreign policy experts. And we delivered international programs, virtual exchanges, and knowledge competitions for thousands of high school and college students across Minnesota over the past year. For our business community, the organization has delivered programs on sustainability topics. We hold international trade programs. We hold programs on global trends and global challenges and on foreign policy as well. We also importantly offer our business leaders the opportunity for access to diplomats and foreign policy experts for insights on international trends and issues, and also for the chance to have a little more brand exposure as part of their work in the international realm. We have a terrific team of corporate members that have joined us and work with us on a regular basis. We're thankful again to all of you that are currently members in the organization. If you'd like, though, to learn more about being a Global Minnesota member, you can certainly reach out to Steve Riedel here, and he'd be happy to give you more information to learn more about being a Global Minnesota member company. Now, it's my pleasure. I always ask this question in a room like this. How many in the room know Steve Riedel? Raise your hand if you know Steve Riedel. Okay, so you know, I think Steve Riedel actually, because he's done so much work in water in the state of Minnesota. You know how they have like the call signs, like they have Maverick and they have Goose. I think we should be calling him Aquaman. How does that sound to all of you? So it's my pleasure to bring forward Steve Riedel to make a few comments as well. Thank you again, everyone, for being here, being part of the program, and being part of the network of support to the work we're trying to accomplish in advancing international understanding and engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Aquaman. I've been called worse, so but thank you. But thank you. But I mean, I think of myself as the convener, and I think of Heather and Martin and Anna as we'll call them Aqua Heroes. Would that be all right? Really. So it's a pleasure to be bringing you together in this room this morning to talk about this topic. The fact that we've got 200 people tuned in this morning, to me, that is a vote of confidence that this is a topic that matters to you. So it's really a pleasure to bring you together this morning. So I manage our corporate membership program, and I want to highlight the fact that many of our corporate members have something to offer on this topic. So this is just a snapshot of a handout that you'll find in the back of the room. There's of the 52 Global Minnesota corporate members, around 20 of them have something specific to offer. So if you are a corporate sustainability officer or someone who's charged with making progress on the sustainability plan in your company or your organization, think of Global Minnesota's resources. I'm so impressed with the talents, the technologies, the products, and the expertise of our very own members. So think of them, and if you would like a resource that you don't see on there, consider that a service that Global Minnesota can perform. Please reach out to me. So, to set the stage for today, Global Minnesota is all about sharing global best practices. So I reflected a little bit on some things that I've seen covering water for the state of Minnesota in my previous role and in preparation for today, and the fact that there's some pretty cool ideas that started somewhere and then they traveled across the border somewhere else and they've been adopted and used. And that's what we want to encourage. That's what our event is about today. I began with drip irrigation, something that Israel invented because they're in a very water scarce region. And if you've not heard of drip irrigation, the simple version is you take your garden hose and you drill some holes in it, and then it very conveniently irrigates your yard, and it doesn't evaporate. The big sprayers that you see, the big ag irrigation sprayers, when it's windy, you lose a lot of that water. Israel cannot afford to let any of that water disappear. So really simple. Any of us can understand it. Don't need to be a water expert to appreciate that if you're going to irrigate, you don't need it to evaporate. So we're glad that we learned that from Israel. Constructed wetlands. This is one I learned from working with a company called North American Wetlands Engineering, and they are now part of Stantec, which is a company based in, Edmonton, Alberta. And I think Chris Meehan was signed up today from Stantec. Chris, are you here? Might not have been able to make it, but I want to mention it because the Consulate of Canada referred me to Chris and his company, and constructed wetlands is a case where we're simply following how nature does things. All the wetlands, we live in Minneapolis, you see that we've got marshes all over the Twin Cities. Those marshes actually clean water naturally. So though, instead of just making a device, sometimes we actually build a wetland in order to make sure that our environment cleans and recycles water on its own. And so it's a kind of biomimicry. So this is something that a Canadian company is taking all over the world. That's example number 2. Next, I want to mention digitalization, and sometimes called smart water. This is one that Minnesota and the U.S. are pretty good at, and we've taken it abroad. When you want to monitor and measure the quality of water, those things are crucial to conservation, and being able to do that with digital tools is really useful. And so we've got some companies here in Minnesota that are using Internet of Things and digitalization technology to enable that kind of process. One of our corporate members, New Boundary Technologies, is tuned in virtually this morning. Kim, good morning to you. We can't see you, but we know you're out there. Kim is an incredible innovator in how to add Internet of Things technology in all kinds of verticals so that we can operate things remotely, gather data, make use of it, make things more efficient. So this is something we've shared with the world. And then finally, you're wondering, what is this sort of port swing and refrigerator-like device up there? I'm just having a little bit of fun with you because this isn't something I think we're going to see anytime soon. But what that is, that's a Dutch product. The company's called Hydroloop, and they have designed and constructed and are beginning to market a wastewater treatment technology that can go in a home or a residence. It isn't something we think about very much. When we use our dishwasher and our shower and we use our water, out it goes to the wastewater treatment plant. We don't think about it again. But if we lived in a world where the water scarcity was so great that we had to use and treat and reuse our own water in our residence, we might need something like this. So I don't think this is coming anytime soon to Minnesota. We're a water abundant region, not a water scarce region. But this is my invitation to you to think about, well, what does water mean to me as an individual? We're here today to learn about what our big companies have to teach us about what they've learned to make sure that they use water responsibly and sustainably, but all of us play a role in this too. So this is a cool technology that I saw at Aquatech Amsterdam, and I was traveling with Mr. Peter Cartwright. Peter, if you could wave. Peter is one of those people who helped me get acquainted with especially membranes infiltration. Peter is the state of Minnesota's foremost expert in this topic, and I want to thank him for how he was able to educate me as a layperson and a non-engineer on the work that we do. And there's other folks in the room who I owe a thanks to too for things that I've learned along the way. So Peter and I saw this technology, and we're still asking the question, is this ever coming to us? So this is from the Netherlands, another place of great water abundance. No shortage of water in the Netherlands. But is it coming our way? Maybe. Anyway, it gives us reason to at least think about it. So that's to set the stage on what we mean by global best practices. That's what Global Minnesota is all about. So now we're going to hear from our companies. And it's my pleasure to bring up our first speaker from Cargill. Heather Tansey has more than 20 years of experience in the sustainability field, and she serves as Cargill's Vice President for Environmental Sustainability. In this role, Heather's responsible for developing and executing Cargill's corporate strategies in climate, land use, regenerative agriculture, water, and sustainable operations for Cargill globally. Prior to Cargill, Heather spent 15 years at 3M and began her career at the U.S. Environmental Agency, where she co-developed the EPA's Climate Leaders Program. Heather's bio is so impressive. She's really quite the leader. So Heather, thank you for sharing your expertise with us this morning.
Oh, thank you. I think I'm going to use
you
the
go.
podium.
Very good. Okay.
We'll test it out. We'll see.
Alrighty.
So, hi, welcome. It's great to see everyone here today and such a packed audience to talk about water. I think that speaks a lot about the importance of this issue for us. Here we go. So it's no coincidence that we're having this meeting here today on the eve of World Water Day. You probably all have big plans with your family to celebrate World Water Day. But I do think it's an important milestone for us all to think about the water space, right? There are a lot of pressing challenges out there, and it's a time for us to acknowledge that and have conversations about it, but also an opportunity, I think, to learn from each other. I often say that sustainability is a team sport and no one actor can do it alone. So to me, it's great to have venues like this where we can cooperate together and learn from each other around how we're addressing these issues. So Steve mentioned in Minnesota, we're a water abundant state. And I have to say, growing up in Minnesota, going out into the lakes and spending time here, I don't know that I thought about water challenges, right, in the same way that I do now today. But you might be surprised to find out that, unlike Minnesota, almost half the world's population faces water scarcity for at least part of the year, which is a pretty staggering number. And the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, predicts that figure will go up over time, right, as we see populations increase. And we know that between now and 2030, there will be an additional 500 million people on the planet. And we expect those new people to cause global demand for water to exceed supply by more than 55%. I mean, these are pretty staggering issues, and they're not far into the future. Cargill's an agricultural company, and when we think about water and we think about the things that we can do to address global challenges, we don't think about them in years so much. We think about them in growing seasons. And 2030 feels a long way away until you say, well, that's 6 to 7 growing seasons. So we really need to start working today, right, to drive urgency to impact these numbers. Part of the reason why water didn't spring as an issue to me as a young girl growing up in Minnesota is that it is essentially a very local issue, right? What happens in watersheds differs across the world. So we don't necessarily see the water challenges if we're not living in a water stressed or a water scarce watershed. But my role at Cargill has really enabled me to have a broader perspective on these things. I've been fortunate enough to visit farmers throughout North America, farmers in Asia and Europe, and I've been able to see, unfortunately, some of the impacts of drought, right? What happens on farm when you haven't had enough rain and your irrigation capabilities just aren't there? It can be a really staggering impact to a local community and a local business in farming. Water ultimately is a finite resource. We can't create any more of it, so we need to be focused on protecting it and preserving it. But I think that maybe minimizes or simplifies the importance of water. When we think about water, I think it's critical to think about it in the context of other environmental issues, right? So if you think about climate change in particular, so climate change being the long-term shifts in temperature and weather patterns primarily caused by human activities like the burning of fossil fuels. When you add climate change on top of water scarcity or water stress at a local level, you've got even bigger challenges. Because imagine if you're in a community where you don't have access to fresh water for hand sanitation or hygiene or drinking water, and now you've got extreme weather patterns, and now you've got drought, those challenges just become multiple fold. But the good news on that dynamic is that the flip side of the coin is also true. So as we build resilience in our supply chain and we have interventions that reduce the impact of or reduce our water use or help us to reduce water pollutants, in many cases, those practices also have benefits from a climate perspective. In some cases, they make our farms more resilient to that extreme weather patterns, but in other cases, they can actually even help mitigate climate change. And as I talk a little bit, I'll give you a few examples of how that's the case. But a little preview, at our core, Cargill's an agricultural company. And so we really see our approach to sustainability as well as the solutions to sustainability challenges as being rooted in agriculture. So just to give you a sense of our ambition around water, at Cargill, we are working to enable a water positive impact across our operations, supply chains, and in the communities where we operate. So you might be wondering what this means in specific and why water is such a critical issue for us. Hopefully none of you here today, but you might be surprised to find out that 70% of the global freshwater used across the world is used by the food and agricultural sector. So we have an outsized share of the responsibility when it comes to water. It's a critical issue for Cargill, for our suppliers upstream, the farmers and ranchers that we work with, but it's also really important to our downstream customers, right? The food service companies, retailers, food manufacturers. Water is really a shared challenge amongst our supply chain, and we play a critical role in it. And as you'll notice, Cargill is right at this middle of that supply chain. So that puts us in a really, I think, ideal position to be a connector of the supply chain to help bring the perspective of farmers downstream to our customers and help bring our customers' expectations and desires upstream to farmers. It gives Cargill the opportunity to really be a solutions provider to help go in and execute on the ground in partnership with our farmers, scalable solutions that help address these challenges. So really, we define a water positive impact as improving watershed health by addressing those shared challenges of availability, quality, and access to safe drinking water. So if you really think about it at the most simple level, enabling a water positive impact means that the watershed is better because we're a part of it. So a little bit about how we got to that bold ambition. About 3 years ago, or probably this journey started, if I'm honest, about 5-6 years ago, we really sat down to say, what is our strategy going to be around water and how do we develop this, right? Knowing that water is such a critical issue for the food and ag sector, we partnered with the World Resources Institute to really help us develop a robust strategy. And we started by saying, where are our biggest contributions to water amongst our supply chain? And what we found out is we're only using about 10% of the water in our overall water footprint. 90% of it happens outside the four walls of Cargill. So it happens up in our supply chain and downstream, but predominantly upstream with farmers. And so our next step was to say, okay, let's map where that water use is happening across the globe. And WRI was a great partner for us because they, in addition to us understanding where our sourcing regions were, they were able to bring some technical data that helped us understand what actually was happening on the ground in those locations we're sourcing from. So we talked about how water is inherently a very local issue. Well, if we're going to focus on areas to reduce water use and help make contributions towards that 70% of water use that's used by the food and ag system, we want to do so in the watersheds that are unsustainable, right? If you've got a watershed that's sustainably using water, then that system is in good shape, right? If you think back to your second grade biological systems, right? Water comes up, it comes back down. You've got a healthy system in place. Where you have a problem and where you need interventions is where you're taking too much or you're putting too many pollutants in and it's not operating at a sustainable space. So WRI was able to help us identify at the watershed level where those challenge areas were. And as we're laying that information on top, that gives us a way to prioritize where we're going to lean into improving the quantity of water, so more water available through different activities, where we want to reduce the impact of agriculture and other pollutants in the system. And again, where we have communities that are a part of our supply chain that might not have access to critical water for hygiene, for drinking, for sustainable agriculture. So really targeting those smallholder farmers that may not have the water access that we enjoy every day here in Minnesota. And that really drove our overall strategy. So it was a very science-based approach. I can say this because this happened before I was in my role, so I can brag a little on it. It's, I think, one of the most leading approaches around water, the team that put it together. So it's just really impressive and very much context and locally focused. So those numbers on the previous slide, if you remember them, I'll pop them back, where we talk about the pounds of pollutants and the gallons of water we want to replenish. Those are actually driven by the impact that we're having, and in each watershed level, figuring out how we're going to move that to a more sustainable water use. So today, I think we're on a pretty good track in terms of making progress on our goals, right? We are in our operational footprint, right? That 10% of water use. We've identified 72 facilities that are significant water users and sit in watersheds where there's a water scarcity or water risk. Those facilities, their jobs are to go out and develop a water stewardship plan that is unique and customized to their watershed. So again, we can't do this alone, right? So each facility goes out and they understand who else uses in this watershed. What are all the different uses? How do we pull those stakeholders together and come up with a common approach that's going to make sense for our local community and our local watershed? So what you see from a manufacturing facility in California might look really different than the watershed plan that's put together in Thailand, right? Because it just depends on all the different uses and all the actors in that system. But we're on track right now. So we've asked them all to develop these plans, and we've achieved 78% of our water stewardship practices that are called out in those plans. We've also enabled across our supply chains, and I'll talk a little bit about what this looks like and how we get there, but we've enabled a restoration of 9.2 billion liters of water and the reduction of 129 metric tons of nitrogen equivalents. So reducing both the water use as well as the pollutants that are going into the watershed in those local areas. And in the communities where we live and work, we've enabled water access and just drinking water and sanitation for more than 108,000 people, which is pretty exciting. So what does this look like on the ground? So we'll start here in Minnesota. As we said, Minnesota is a fairly water abundant place, but there are watershed challenges. And I think it's critical that we build capacity and capability to understand those challenges and address them as they happen on a local level. So the work that we've done in Minnesota has been largely around, to my mind, capability building, education, bringing folks along. So in Minnesota, we provided a $225,000 grant to the Friends of the Mississippi River for their STEM River Stewards program. So this is a great program that engages young people in learning about local land and water resources, helping them develop professional skills, introducing them to career pathways. So really inspiring that next generation of environmental stewards that's going to take over the work that we're all starting here today. We've also provided a $10,000 grant to the Minnesota Valley Wildlife Refuge, which is helping, again, support a water quality study to understand some of the water issues in the refuge. One of the most critical ways that we're doing this is through scaling adoption of regenerative agriculture across Cargill's operations. So this is a picture of Stephen Flagg, and I'll get to Stephen in a second, but I'll maybe take a step back and talk a little bit about how we think about regenerative agriculture at Cargill. So we see Regen Ag as really a critical way that we're going to achieve a number of our environmental priorities and address them. Regenerative ag, for those of you who may not be familiar with it, right, are practices that help keep the soil preserve the soil and keep the root structures and the plants that are within the soil. So the practices that farmers take can look really different, right? It can be everything from not tilling in your farm. It might be that you're going to plant cover crops. And so when you plant your new crop, you don't dig it all up. You don't have that black field that we see when we drive to northern Minnesota. It's going to have plant material that's keeping that soil in place and keeping those root structures. One of the things that's really powerful about Regen Ag is it's a solution that offers stacked benefits, right? So it helps us achieve multiple of our environmental goals. So when you implement Regen Ag, you actually help hold water. So when there's extreme weather events, if you've got a drought, the water content in your soil is going to be just naturally higher because it's held in there. But it also helps keep that soil. So if there's big winds that come through, your soil is keeping intact. And over the long term, we see that farmers are actually improving their yields too with this practice. So it's a practice that helps from a water perspective, both to reduce use, as well as to reduce the pollutants that run off as associated, because it holds it in there. It makes good use of that fertilizer when it's used. It also can help sequester carbon. So if you're keeping those root structures and you're not breaking up the soil, you're not releasing that carbon into the atmosphere. So you're creating multiple benefits as well as that farmer livelihoods piece, right, by improving their yield and their work there. So at Cargill, our vision is that regenerative agriculture is commonplace across all of our supply chains. But we've created a goal to help drive that progress in North America, where we're targeting adoption of Regen Ag practices in 10 million of our acres. Steve Flagg, I'll get back to Steve now. He is one farmer that participates in a program that we have called Regen Connect. And Regen Connect goes out and it works with farmers, gives them technical assistance to implement Regen Ag on site. And then we actually pay them. So they're not just growers of corn or soybeans, they're also growers of carbon. So we pay them for those carbon sinks that they create in their farm. And we're able to share those reductions and use those for both Cargill's goals as well as towards our downstream customers. So Stephen owns a farm in Indiana, and he had not done much around Regen Ag, but he started by implementing cover crops in one of his fields. And what he shared with us is that, yes, it was great. He had a carbon benefit that he was able to be paid by Cargill for, but he said he really saw a reduced use in having to turn on his sprinklers, right? He didn't have to irrigate as much. And he saw some good resilience, right? As storms and things came in, he really saw a difference from his fields than those of his neighbors. So Regen Connect launched about 2 or 3 years ago, so it's still in its infancy. It's across 24 states in the US and 4 countries in Europe. And all of our regen efforts, over the year 2023 actually contributed to 3.4 billion liters of improved water approved water availability and reducing more than 60 tons of pollutants. So it's really, we're just early days in this journey. We expect to hockey stick up, right? The adoption of regen ag practices. As farmers do it, they learn more, they become advocates to fellow farmers. And it's a really critical way that we're going to scale this across our supply chains. Another example, and this gets Steve, this gets a little bit to your drip irrigation, but on maybe a much more technological scale, right? So one of the things that we're doing is working specifically in a few regions in Mexico where there's really dramatic water challenges. It's very arid conditions. It's an area that there's a tremendous amount of corn grown, but we see our water resources reducing over time. And we're doing a pilot with 2 farmers right now where we're going out and using this precision irrigation. So it's an irrigation that happens exactly where it needs to be. So you don't have excess irrigation that goes to other things. It goes right to that plant where you need it. And it has the potential, we're seeing, to reduce water use by 30 to 50% on farms. So it's a pretty dramatic impact. And the way we're enabling this adoption is we're actually providing farmers with attractive financing. So lower interest loans that they're able to take to access the financing to do this. And we find that this is helping pay for itself because of the reduction in water use and the costs associated with it for those farmers. Again, it's early days there, but we've had a lot of interest and we expect to start scaling the program, after we finalize the pilots. Another, I think, critical area is to talk about the communities where we touch, right, and where we operate. So we have a cocoa and chocolate business that works in Côte d'Ivoire and sources from a number of smallholder farmers there. But those communities don't always have the right access to hand hygiene, to water, to drinking water. And so what we're doing is we're working with the Global Water Challenge to launch a program called Cargill Currents. So we're giving $3 million over 3 years to create local programs that are very customized to the communities. And what they're doing is they're supporting access to safe drinking water and sanitation through those customized programs. I think it's a great program because it's building community resilience, economic development, and again, it's building, it's a stacked benefit program, right? It's not just about water access, it's building benefits that go well beyond that. By the end of 2024, we have impacted almost 150,000 people through the program. So really an exciting work that's going on there as well. So these investments I talked about Côte d'Ivoire, we have investments that are critical there, but they're actually spanning across 6 countries. So Brazil, Cameroon, Ghana, India, Indonesia, and even the US. In West Africa alone, nearly 48,000 people have been benefited to date, including projects in 17 communities with 12 schools and 4 healthcare facilities. So you can see they're really specific programs that are tailored to those needs. But, the biggest opportunity, and I mentioned this a little at the beginning and probably didn't pull it out enough through my remarks, though, is I think the biggest opportunity we have on addressing water challenges in our shared supply chains is by partnering together, right, at the watershed level. It's one of the things that I really like about the work that we do around water is that it is so locally based. So it's not that we're just working with the ag community. That in and of itself is critically important to work with farmers and make those connections. But we're working with all sorts of actors that are within the watershed to drive forward this progress. And I think having a shared vision around collaboration to address these challenges are really how we're going to deliver on having a future fit food system and continuing to scale water opportunities globally. So thank you for that opportunity. I think I have 10 minutes. Is that right? Yeah, if there's questions.
Can we say thank you to Heather for that awesome presentation? When she says that water is local, think about a company the size of Cargill trying to figure out what local actually means. I think that makes your work pretty challenging at times.
Absolutely, yes. That's why we need partners to help us understand those.
I'll say. So let's start with questions in the room. Who has questions for Heather? And please wait for a microphone. Over here.
Hi, thank you. My question is, what do you foresee as conflict for the younger generation with these new solutions long term?
What do I see as conflict?
Yeah.
Well, hopefully there's not conflict, right? I think, so if you take a step back, right, global water challenges are political issues as well, right? So I think that we could get to a point where we have unrest because of water access. At Cargill, we believe access to drinking water and sanitation water is a fundamental right, but in some parts of the world, there may be places where that's not happening, and certainly that could lead towards conflict. But I think it's why it's so critical that we strategically address these challenges today so we don't end up in that situation.
All right. I'm Musa Usman. I'm here working at Cargill. So I'm originally from Niger Republic. That's in the Sahara. So when we talk about water really problem, it's just really deal in Africa over where I grew up from. Because of water, we can see a lot of no access to water, droughts, and sometimes of the climate change is affect the whole livelihood. People just say a lot of conflict now in the Sahara is generated due to the lack of water, food insecurity, famine, and we feel even our existence today in the Sahara is just online. So it's very important with this technology to think about we as a global society, how we think about these people in the Sahara, in the Sahel. What are some of the technology that can adapt and help this community? That's very important for us and for human race.
No, thank you. That's a great point. And I think making sure that we equitably distribute those technologies is really critical.
Hello, thank you so much. I have many questions, but the one that I'm very curious about, and I think we've all been in situations where change is always difficult. Maybe you see that in your work or family. And so when I think about the farmers, and I believe you have that regenerative agriculture, it sounds like a clear win. But I think that a lot of people, it's like, well, we've always done it this way and it's always worked, or why is it important to me? Therefore, my question is how are you teaching farmers or educating farmers to change their practices and see the benefits of this new, or maybe it's not so new, agricultural practice? Thank you.
It's a great question, and you get it at the heart of the issue. So I'm going to try to control myself from not having another 20-minute speech on this because it's a passion area for me. But I would start with saying, I think farmers are really the ultimate environmental stewards. And in my experience, farmers are really open to adopting new processes and things that help their farm and help protect the soils. You know, they really see themselves as guardians of those soils. But to your point, many of these farmers they're small business owners, and taking a risk of a new practice like that can be very challenging. And some of the things that we've seen actually with regenerative agriculture is in the first couple years, you can actually have a bit of a dip in yield, right? You know, it's long term, over 4 or 5 years, you're seeing a scaling, positive impact. But in that beginning, it's a challenge. And that's really the essence of why we shaped Regen Connect the way we did, right? Is we wanted to offer a financial incentive to those farmers so that we helped keep them whole, right, as that initial dip happened, and so that we could continue so that they could grow their businesses. So I would say it's a combination of things. We bring technical resources to the farmers to help them. We have agronomists that are all over the US engaging with farmers, helping them to understand these techniques, working on a customized plan for their farm. It's a fully opt-in program, so farmers come to us when they want to participate. They get to choose what practices they implement. So again, it's very flexible to meet their needs. And then that carbon incentive really helps them. And what we do is we estimate what we think the carbon sequestration will be. So we have a monitoring, verification, and reporting partner that does some very scientific measurements at the end, but we're able to do an estimate of what we think will happen. And using that data, we pay them half of it upfront. So that way they've got that money before they start the process, and that gives them some security in doing it. And then the last piece that I would say on this is, I think what I have found really exciting about the program is that farmers don't really want to hear from Heather, who grew up in Edina and has never lived on a farm, on what to do. Let's just be honest. They're nice, but they don't want to hear from me. But they do want to hear from fellow farmers. And so one of the things that I think Regen Connect has done that's been really powerful is hold field days all over the U.S. And that's where farmers go and they meet with other farmers that are in the program or have been implementing these practices, and they learn from each other. And those are just fascinating to go to because of the dialogue and what they ask, and you just learn so much in it. But we find that farmers are the best advocates for this, and they really can help educate their fellow farmers. Yeah.
Steve Kelly at the Humphrey School. So I recently heard somebody talk, it was a good point about protecting the farmers on that side of the equation, but I heard someone say recently that regenerative agriculture on the marketing or consumer side actually yields a price premium, and that price premium can be higher than labeling something as organic. So I'm curious what that looks like from Cargill's perspective as you're working with your customers.
Yeah, I think that's definitely an emerging area. We're seeing regenerative labels on products, and even companies so Walmart's a big customer of Cargill, right, has pledged to become the most regenerative company. So we're seeing that. And I think it is something that really resonates with consumers. I was just yesterday at a program at Duke University, and people had the most sophisticated questions to ask about regenerative agriculture, a bunch of MBA students. So it's really, I think that there's something that's captured people's attention there. One of the things that we're doing to enable our downstream customers to be able to make those types of claims is trying to create a system that both has flexibility for the farmer, right, so that they can implement the practices that make sense for them, and that it's flexible enough, but also that there's a way to substantiate it, because we don't want regenerative to just become this term that doesn't really mean anything. And so we're partnering through the World Business Council for Sustainable Development's Action Agenda for Regen Landscapes to across the sector. So there's retailers and food service groups and farmers to say, how do we develop what is the right set of KPIs that we can use, our key performance indicators, that helps us really determine what is regen ag, so that as there's a lot of interest in making these claims, and that's great if we can help provide additional value-added income back to farmers because there's a value, with the product itself. I mean, that's something I think we're really interested in pursuing, but it's got to be credible, right, to the downstream consumer. So it's a growing field and more to come on that, I think. Yeah.
Hello, Mark Olswick with Easy Automation and Easy Energy Systems, Inc. So a question that I'm kind of puzzled on. So Cargill's got an incredible brand, but from my view, you've made the company's whole entire existence based on very large centralized solutions. So you put in large processing plants, large centralizing it. But in my mind, true regenerative is decentralized, meaning in a perfect world, instead of the farmers bringing it to a central processing plant and then bringing it back to their farm, it all happens decentralized. So just curious how, I've got the utmost respect for Cargill, how you see making that cultural change to do decentralized solutions for the farmers, because otherwise you get the carbon to and from the central.
I'm not sure I totally follow the carbon going back and forth.
Okay, so
apologies if I'm not understanding your question.
So if you load grain on a semi,
Yeah.
run it 200 miles to a centralized location, that's all does all the processing, load the processing on semis and bring them back
Oh, you mean like taking? I see what you're saying. So if you're taking
to a centralized
feed,
location.
if you're making like a feed product or
Feed
something.
is one, fertilizer is one, chemicals are one. Just,
Yeah, I mean, I think
sugar.
I think you've pinpointed on challenges that we face, right? How do you have scale in doing these things in an efficient way? One of the things that we're very focused on is building a more efficient distribution system for food, right? And as an example, this is not necessarily getting in a semi truck, but one of the examples that we're doing is we're targeting the ocean transport piece, right? So that's maybe a between nations kind of transportation. And if you were to take ocean transportation as a sector, it would be the 5th largest carbon user as an economy, right? So it's critically important. One thing that we've recently done is we're partnering with Bar Engineering to look at, and I love this example because it's just really fun to look at, but basically it takes yacht technology and we're building these huge sails they're inflexible, that are about 150 feet. They go up on your container ship and they capture the power of the wind. So it's kind of a common sense, right? We knew wind could power ships, but we didn't think about it in the container ship capacity. So we're capturing that power of the wind, and it's actually reducing the carbon footprint of moving that grain around by up to 30%. So we've piloted our first ship. It's in the port of Amsterdam. Some of our colleagues at Cargill sent pictures yesterday. They were all out there. I think we're all really excited about the future of that, and decarbonizing shipping and decarbonizing transportation is a critical part of our strategy. Yeah. Yep.
We have time for one more question. Right here, please. I think I caught his hand first. We'll catch you later, George.
Kurt Johnson with Global Wellness Connections. This may strike you as a naive question because you paint a very good picture of Cargill's efforts to try to deal with water. But I wonder if the fact that the aquifers are going down, not up, not as fast as the Ogallala, but going down, the fact that of the lakes and streams and rivers that we've tested, some 45% are not safely swimmable or fishable, those are just 2 indicators. Does it take a crisis in 2 or 3 cities to raise water on the public demand schedule so that we can do something politically about it? We have maybe the best unorganized system of water at the state level of any state that we can think of. But mayors tell me that it'll take a crisis to raise public demand. Do you agree from where you sit at Cargill?
I believe that I believe that crises can have their opportunities, right? I started my life at the EPA, and so I know a good policy window when I see one, and that those certainly can be powerful in creating a public discourse around things. That said, I think a lot of the interventions that Cargill is looking at to address global water needs have so many other stacked benefits that we believe that they will be scalable in absence of a crisis. And I think it's why we're leading into those particular ones, because we don't want to wait till that happens. That's not a sustainable way to look at issues, right? Yes, they certainly offer opportunities. We saw in Detroit and other areas how some of those water challenges elevated the dialogue. But it's part of why we focus on things like regenerative agriculture that have multiple benefits. And if we can start to scale that, we believe we can solve these issues without having to have those crises. Great. Thank you.
I think Heather has to run, but I want to say thank you one more time. When I think about Global Minnesota corporate members that are globally minded, have a global presence, and pay attention to global best practices, they don't get much more global than Cargill. So Heather, thank you one more time. Now we're ready to move on to our next speaker. To introduce our next speaker, I'm going to invite the Quebec government delegation in Chicago. Mr. Dominique Tétu is Director of Economic Affairs at the Quebec office in Chicago. He has kindly come to visit us from Chicago just for this event. His government office recently joined Global Minnesota as a corporate member because they have some economic development goals for companies in their territory, and we're having a lot of fun just getting acquainted. It's only been about 6 weeks, but we have an immediate opportunity to share a story coming from Montreal, and I will invite Dominique to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you so much, Steve. Our office is based out of Chicago, covers 12 states in the Midwest region. It's part of a network of 10 offices in the US, 37 offices worldwide. We've been established back in 1969, and our main purpose is really to promote Quebec's interests in areas of common benefit, including obviously economic development, as you mentioned, Steve, but water, sustainability, renewable energy, those are very hot topics for Quebec, and they're top of mind. So that's why we're so excited to engage with the community of Global Minnesota. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Cargill, for receiving us. We're very excited to get this first initiative with Global Minnesota on the topic of water, and to be able to have Martin Bureau, who heads the PFAS Center of Excellence at Altra. Martin is a real industry expert, graduated in engineering back in 1992, PhD in materials science back in 1997, a long career at the National Research Council of Canada, and now heading Ultra Sanexin initiatives to tackle such important challenges as water issues for cities, for obviously municipalities, companies. So very excited to listen to Martin. Welcome. The floor is yours, Martin, and thank you again, Steve, Phil, and Global Minnesota.
Testing my sound. Okay, not bad. Well, it's an honor to be with you today. First opportunity at MN Global. We are based in Minnesota, believe it or not. We operate a landfill leachate treatment plant that strictly deals with the PFAS at the local landfill sites just south of Minneapolis. It's called SKB Rosemont, and it's operated by the third of the industry, probably, Waste Connections, and they're partnering with us over there. It's the first such facility in North America, and we're really glad to be the first on the market and addressing it on a daily basis. Heather gave a great introduction, and you, sir, asked a few questions that I'm going to address, so I'm glad that you did. We're here to talk about water resiliency. The climate is changing. There's a new context. Heather talked about this. I won't allude too much about it, but let me just complete what she said. I had more notes, but so we have a lot of water. We have 25% of the fresh water of the world around the Great Lakes, and we take comfort into that. But we only have about 3% of the renewable source of water in that area, because all of that is going to the oceans. So while we have a lot, it's not because of that we should waste it. And you know about the state of Lake Erie, for example. That's a great example of places where we need to do better. And Lake Superior, of course, due to its size, has less of those issues, but they're all at risk. This winter, 25% of the continental US were in drought. So it's not true that we have access to water that much. In August 23, 22 million people in this country didn't have access to water, period. That's huge. And at the same time, California or southern Texas didn't have access, had drought, flooding, sorry. So it's a complex situation. Minnesota last Christmas, not this one, but the one before, had tons of rain and then droughts. And then you had a very dry and warm and slowless winter this winter. So it's all changing. Last summer, you had all our smoke from Canada because of the fires. I mean, some of those fires are still going on under the ground. They're not put out yet, and they will start again. So it's really an intense situation. And we're at the pivot. That crisis is a water crisis. A few facts preparing that talk. One is striking. The water-related disasters account for more than 90% of the $4 trillion in economic losses that we experience in this country over the last 50 years. 4 trillion, I don't even know what that means. Shortage of drought are exacerbating the state of our water infrastructure. Canada and the US, it's the same. There's 2 trillion gallons of water that are being lost every day in this country. 10% more in Canada, I guess. 15% of your drinking water, that's treated water, is lost. That's the national average. I was able to find Wisconsin statistics, not Minnesota. It's 15%. Sorry, it's 20%. It's high. It's very high. 20% of the pipe need to be changed. Now, not 50 years from now. Now. In a single day, in July 22, Houston had 1,000 water main break. 1,000, because they have a very intense drought, and they have that kind of soil. It's a clay soil that tends to subside very, very much. And as a result, all those old pipes that were damaged broke. 1,000. That's the whole budget of this fellow, Mr. Johnson, Director of Water, that goes that day for all his network. He has no more money for the rest of the year. It's really amazing. What else? I could go on forever, but that's not the point. We have emerging contaminants, but we have old contaminants as well. More than 20 million people in this country still rely on lead lines for their water. There's no safe level for lead in your water, especially for pregnant women, for example, or infants. And the PFAS situation, and I believe everyone knows about PFAS, forever chemicals. Some companies here have used it, other states have as well. Minnesota is kind of at the heart, or one of the hearts, if I can say, of this thing, but North Carolina is as well. Maine, due to their biosolid use of PFAS, is another. The PFAS situation is making things even worse, because the EPA and the local states are actually right now addressing that issue, and we don't know exactly how it's going to cost. And you see the numbers, they're insane. I mean, way too big for anyone to address it. So there's a bit of denial at this point. I was at the Global Waste Management Symposium 2 weeks ago, and one of the keynotes was actually kind of making jokes on how bad could this be since it's so big. And it made me think of that movie, Don't Look Up, really, the same attitude. So definitely there's something to be done, and it's too big for us to, like you, me, and you, to do it alone. So there's a lot to be done. I'll cut on the statistics, but only one. Replacing all those pipes in this country and Canada is just not an option. There is no iron pipes or PVC pipes or polyethylene pipes just to change it, period. We don't have enough time. We don't have enough manpower as well. So that is demanding for new solutions. It's not a matter of choice. It's a matter of when we'll make those decisions. So that's a big important factor. 2 slides borrowed from the American Water Works Association and the Bluefield Research. They're a think tank in Boston that are doing great work. I must say I'm a big fan of what they do. This is, on one side, the water main infrastructure by region in age. So obviously, West Coast is younger than the Midwest or the East Coast, I believe. And you see, with navy blue and middle blue, the age of the infrastructure. Let me remind you that the light blue is still 31 to 60 years old. So in some region, for example, a small city on the Montreal Island, they've built everything in the 70s. It's ductile iron pipe, like typical pipe. You have the same here. It's all corroded, it's all dead. Why? Because of that soil that they have, plus the climate that we have. Lots of water, freeze-thaw cycles and everything. So it's going to hell currently. And it's not even 50 years. So 30 to 60 years is actually past the design life for many infrastructures. Another point, the water loss. California, Georgia, this is difficult data to get. Try to find the leaks from Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. That is absolute taboo. You can't have it. It's below 10, but it's above 5. And it's an unthinkable amount of water for them to be publicly disclosing. So it's a big thing. So I won't point fingers at any state here, but we're all in this. Montreal used to have up to 60%, 60% of its water loss. Of course, we've got plenty, so who cares? That was the attitude back in the 90s. Now we're down to 26, which is very good, but it's way too much anyway. So there's a lot that needs to be done. That's the infrastructure state. Then the water quality state. Like I said, 14 to 28 billion of drinking water remediation technology use in the coming years. And it has started new technologies for lining lead lines, for example, or treating PFAS, or protecting systems from other emerging contaminants. Let's think of arsenic, for example. And so lots of money, lots of new technology, and I'll talk about the funding from the federal government. But there's only a handful of states that have actually clearly stated what they want to do and their priorities. Minnesota is one of them. Wisconsin is following. And then you have New York and a few others. But while California is doing a lot of regulation, they're actually doing extremely little currently on their infrastructure, and especially on the contaminant of emerging concern front. So that, regulation can be a good thing, but it could be also headwinds. And in California, I can testify because we operate in California. It's very, very complex. And as I said, the PFAS situation is bringing a level of complexity to the situation that and opportunities that is quite overwhelming. There's the investment, the Infrastructure Investment Job Act that will provide funding. It actually started, but if you look at the statistics, it's actually looked at. States are filing, but they're actually using quite little. I don't remember, but I have all those numbers, but it's a fraction of the money that's available. And I was in a city close to Minneapolis yesterday, and the mayor was telling me how difficult it is to apply for those funds. And he's got something like 40% overhead on the funding that he gets just to handle the damn thing. So filing, reporting, it's crazy. And he doesn't have the manpower. That's a 50 to 100,000 people community. So lots of goodwill, of course, and we recognize that, but not simple. Out of that gigantic fund, 10% is dedicated to the water infrastructure. The vast majority goes to the regular state revolving fund for traditional work in infrastructure. Then you've got the emerging contaminants that is taking a lot of attention for good reasons, and lead services. Now, it relies still on digging and replacing. And a fun fact or a crazy fact, perhaps not fun, people lose track of that lead. Where is that lead going? There's thousands and thousands of lead lines that disappear. There's a black market for lead lines. That's crazy. Yeah. There's no custody of those lead lines. So where do they go? I don't know. But I know that when we do, those lines are being stolen. and they just disappear. So handling lead lines just by replacement is cumbersome, it's long, it's expensive. Plus, what do you do with the lead? You'll have to recuperate it. So I guess that traces a portrait both positive and challenging and frightening at the same time. And that's our mission at Senexen, Ultra Senexen, I should say. We deal with a lot of things created 40 years ago. I'm not here to talk too much about us, but we're today relying on talking about water main renewal and PFAS removing solution. If I have time, I see time flying. Let's skip that. The idea is to present an example. We've done 1,500 miles of water main renewal so far, more than any company in North America combined. And the idea is not to replace replacement, because sometimes you need to open those streets, you need to renew everything. But when you don't need that, then there's solutions to just renew from within. This is a trenchless technology. You don't open the street, and then you line. And you see two examples. One was a picture taken in Montreal. It could have been taken here. And that project we have got intense winters. That project lasted 3 summers. The number of bankruptcy on those businesses was 70%, 70. So very, very bad. Now it looks good though. I mean, it recuperated, but it's intense. It's extremely expensive. And the other picture is a job we did on the California coast, and we're actually renewing a pipe 500 feet long in a single shot in a day, and you don't see 2 access pits that are about 8 feet by 8 feet. You dig in the ground and then you repair from within. You see one truck that receives the equipment that we pull, and another that you don't see because it's much smaller, and so our purpose here is to help utilities, municipalities to achieve their targets, which would be, if you're lucky, 100 years replacement, so 1% per year, without the impact. So that's the whole idea. I won't go to the detail because of time, but this is trenchless. It's not sewer, it's water. You access your line, you clean it, you inspect it, you line it, and then you return it to service. The big interest here, and it has tons of implications, including greenhouse gas, is that it's more productive, of course. A single crew, well-trained, could do 1 mile a week, typically. 1 mile of replacement per week. If you had water works in your street, you know that it lasted 4 months. And it was, 500 feet or not even? So it's, you see the economy of scale. So some cities are adapting that. Of course, it was created by a large corporation in the States, and then, but they were doing only sewer. We decided to do water. We launched that in Montreal, then Toronto. Toronto is actually the largest market on earth for water main renewal. But Chicago, Boston, other areas are doing a lot of that, but not nearly enough. We're actually addressing only 1% of the market of infrastructure replacement, 1%. The big pie is for the sidewalk guy and the asphalt guy and the dig guy and the, you understand so that's a challenge. I won't talk about the product. It's, of course, designed to the standards that we need. It will sustain the pressures. It's safe. It's NSF tested and whatnot. You see it's a woven product, so you see a circular loom. So you see the aspect of that fabric. We impregnate it into a resin that's not in contact with the water. It becomes rigid, like a composite for those who ski very close to your skis, and it becomes extremely strong and resilient. Trying to penetrate the Californian market, we were told you got to show that it's going to survive an earthquake, because US Pipes or Kubota or whatever, that's what they did. And so we went to the place they go, Cornell University, to test that. So we did not going to go through the 2 years testing, but the climax of that whole thing was that split basin test, where you have a big sandbox, you bury a pipe, and you shear it, and you look whether it's going to break or not. And if it works, I didn't check. So what we did is we tested it. So that's 2 years of work, and then the final test. That's a $1 million test. And we're going to full extension. You'll see the side of the basin are moving, and eventually they'll align. That's because the Cornell guys were not able to break that pipe, and it's the first time it ever happened. Well, the point here, this is not black magic. This is a material that takes heavy deformation without damage, like your skis. So, of course, you know, a steel pipe or an iron pipe can't behave that way. And against an earthquake, they will break, whereas we don't. So it's just, you know, fundamental material science. Okay, I'll cut the long story, but we tested the material. It was not damaged. The pipe in which it was lined was completely broken, but the material inside survived, and it was pristine. And conclusion by the seismicology expert at Cornell concluded that this was going to survive the next big one in California, and it would have survived Christchurch events in New Zealand. We had 20,000 feet of 12-inch pipe in Anchorage, and none were broken, although we're still working on reports about that, but none were broken in the impacted area. But the story, besides the technology, is this. After 20 years of water main lining at a small suburban community in Montreal, they've replaced, I forgot to change the kilometers to miles. I don't see them anymore. So 160 miles, about 60 miles replacement so far, and 48, if I recall correctly, miles of VAR material into that whole thing. But the point is that more than, or about half of the whole network, it's a small network, 160 miles is very small, but they replaced half of it. And over the years, they reduced their number of water main breaks by 78%. And to this day, they have had no water main breaks into replaced sections. So this is a clear, productive, and there's competition, by the way, we're not the only product, that can provide solution for cities to achieve their target. San Francisco, where we did pilots, sizable pilots, has an objective of 25 miles per year of replacement. They can't do 12 because they don't have the manpower. They can't get the contract out. They don't have the time to do those projects. So we told them, continue doing what you were doing, and we'll do the rest. Open the rest for bids. We'll reach that 25 easy. You know, each project that Montreal or Toronto has is typically 5 to 10 miles per project. One project, we complete the whole deal. And San Francisco has a lot of needs, I can tell you. On top of that, obviously, you've got a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. Compared to open cut, it's 84% reduction. And that's you know, vetted by economists, at government authorities. We didn't calculate that. It's the real numbers from them. So our 1,500 miles so far have had as impacts to reduce 562 kilotons of greenhouse gas. 1.6 million trucks that are not on the road because they don't dig or backfill the roads. And I can guess, you can guess the amount of fuel that was saved. So the idea here that there's a lot of added value at looking technologies, subsidizing cities to start their project, their pilot project. And I was going to say, think about outside the box. Well, for them, yes, because they've never made a project like that, but many others have. So the community effect is very important here. And I believe I'm out of time. So I'll just say this, as I said in the introduction, we just installed a Clean Water as a Service PFAS contract. This is just in your backyard at the Rosemount landfill. You have a picture of the facility. It's operating as we speak. It treats 25 million gallons per year of leachate. We offer a guaranteed treatment. So we're not only are we treating it and not paid if we don't treat it right, but we're paying damages if we don't. So we are guaranteeing that solution. I'll skip this and I'll go to the water for thought. Excuse me. So technology is not the problem. Guys like me develop things all the time, and probably there are many in the rooms as well. So we're kind of trying to find a problem to our solution. So the problem needs to be defined way more than it is actually. And it needs to be incentivized, like you need to do more of that. But climate change is changing the equation right now. It's calling the shot. You know, federal government here, Quebec, Canada are doing a lot. So the question is, are we driving the right decision? Let's not use yesterday's solution for today and tomorrow problem. The community effect is very important. We are in this together, like legislators, professors, future workforce, and brains, all of us, to develop solutions for the challenges that we are facing, and that will create new solutions. For example, a great one. I, as a specialist, don't think that natural gas is the solution for energy crisis, but renewable natural gas is there anyway, and it's a marvelous story to be told. And the mayor of La Crosse had a LinkedIn posting a few weeks back that I saw, and he was proud to show his methane recuperation station, and that is wonderful. So he's reducing his costs. He's reducing the emissions of methane, and he's actually using that for fueling his fleets and so on. So we'll see a lot of that. And I could go on forever, but I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Martin. When we have a pothole in our streets, we tend to notice and we tend to complain and we say, why can't they fix that thing faster? If we have infrastructure problems beneath our feet, we don't tend to know about it until the leak gets so bad that the street is flooded. So thank you, Martin, for the reminder that we cannot neglect our infrastructure issues because they are big ones.
Yeah, they are.
So well done educating us on some tricky infrastructure issues, and your video really made the case. That was impressive. So great. So questions for Martin Bureau? Todd, right up front. I've got the mic.
Thanks, Stephen. Stephen, let me follow up on your point. Martin, years ago, when I was on the body that basically did infrastructure for the Twin Cities, we assumed that sewers would last for 40 to 60 years. Practically all the sewers were over that point when we discussed this, so this is an old issue. And basically the thrust of the question I'm asking is, have we developed an infrastructure we now decide we can't afford? And that we don't know how to coordinate and we don't know how to pay for it. And what you see is this idea that I raised the question at that point of what would it cost us to replace this, and they said you don't want to discuss it politically because the numbers will kill you. Mm-hmm. And we build in this catch-22 mm-hmm. where we don't have a process, and it's not just this. There's road and there's all, we built whole systems that are integrated. But we don't see them. Number one, we don't see them as integrated. Number two, we don't know how to pay for it. Number three, we're afraid to discuss it. So except for that, we're in good shape. So the question becomes, how do we raise this in a way that people understand the impact without the level that Kurt raised in terms of a crisis?
Yeah. Well, I have a very, humbly speaking, that's a huge question for only one guy to answer. So there are my point about not making the same mistakes or using the same tools as we had before, this is not the same problem that we had or you had when you were on that body that was designing this whole thing. So let's not try to replace all this. It's unthinkable. Just like I said, there's not enough iron for doing that. I'm going to use an example. I can comment like this is very, applies to today. Look at the PFAS estimate, the cost of addressing the PFAS issue in drinking water systems in the U.S. It's zillions. I don't even recall what it is. It's enormous. Well, I'm convinced that it's going to cost not even 10% of those prices, because companies like us, like Upanao, like Cargill, for what matters probably, will come with solution to address it differently than putting activated carbon filters that deals with thousands of Olympic pools per day down the whole system. It's going to be addressing the source like Michigan is doing. It's going to be, Minnesota is starting that right now, I learned with the MPCA. So instead, they're subsidizing plants to find who is a source of PFAS in their network, and they come to them with money. Well, constraints, so the baton, the stick, and the carrot. So that's how we're going to be addressing it, with new ways of thinking.
I have time for
there
two
was
more
one
questions.
from this gentleman here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm interested in the project you're working right now with the landfill leachate. I believe in 2016, we actually started one of the first leachate treatment plant here in Minnesota, and we ran into so much problems, especially with the contaminants of emerging concern. One of the challenges we had is which we couldn't overcome MPCA requirements was the issue of boron and the PFAS.
Yeah.
So with PFAS, I'm not sure how you're handling PFAS. If you were able to remove the PFAS, what do you do with it when you remove it?
Okay. Boron is tough because you need to rely on filtration or resins. If there's only boron in the water, then resin will do great, but it's never the case, so they do poorly. PFAS. The idea is to cost effectively concentrate them as much as you can, pre-filtration. Like that's the way to go. And then we will have to rely on either solidification, like casting them in concrete blocks, or destruction technologies. Destruction technologies, there's a few that work, I know, because we vetted all of them, and we will go to the market with one or two of those. Permitting is going to be a gigantic issue with operating fixed facility. It's going to take years for us to get permits. So we've got we're treating today and concentrate today PFAS. So what do I do with the concentrate? So today, not in 5 years. So solidification may be the way to go. And then mobile treatment for destruction. There's a few technologies that they won't destroy totally, but they will destroy very significantly, up to part per trillion levels. To zero, no, not to zero, but 10, 20 part per trillion. Guys, a part per trillion is a sugar cube in a large football stadium. That's a part per trillion. So very small quantity. And then we all ate the word, but diluted with the whole volume, it becomes nothing. So in today's condition, that's probably the way to go. Yeah.
We have time for one more question. Any other questions for Martin? Well, then let's say, Martin, thank you for coming to Montreal to join us. Our next speaker is from Upanor, big employer in Apple Valley. And Global Minnesota is so happy to have Uponor as a corporate member. Last year, we had the privilege of welcoming Ambassador Hautala, Finnish ambassador to the United States, to Minnesota, where Uponor helped us welcome him just at the time Finland was becoming a brand new member of NATO. So this country of 5 million people was suddenly on everybody's mind, and the friendship with the United States and Finland has become deeper, and Uponor helped us do that. So we're so happy to have Anna join us this morning. Anna, I was about to read your bio before, because I want folks to know who you are. Anna Piketty, she's Vice President of Marketing and Strategy for Uponor North America. She oversees all aspects of the marketing function, guides the company's business strategy, and leads a global team responsible for growing the company's global water category. Prior to Uponor, Anna held leadership positions at several industry-leading corporations, including SPS Commerce, Tennant, and Honeywell, diverse set of companies. She holds an MBA from the Carlson School of Management, and she's a member of the Women United Committee for the Greater Twin Cities United States chapter. And finally, she is a USA Hockey certified coach with a local youth hockey program. So Anna, please tell us about this company with the Finnish DNA.
All right. Yes, so I'm from Uponor. It's not Uponor or Uponor, you know, which admittedly before I joined Uponor, I had no idea how to pronounce it. What we do, and this has really kind of been structured really well with Cargill kind of starting large and then Martin bringing it down to the municipal level. And then I'm going to bring it down to a very, very local level of water usage, which is your home, your place of work, education buildings, healthcare buildings. And that's what we do, is we do behind the wall plumbing, which sounds more boring than it actually is, but we have a large impact on the water quality and actually leakage in your home and buildings around your city and municipals. I'll talk a little bit about who Uponor is, because I recognize a lot of you may not know much about us. We are a very sustainability-minded brand. Part of that is because we are a Finnish company. We have a large presence in North America. We like to say that we're the best kept secret in Minnesota because we're a large employer here, but because we're not based in Minnesota, a lot of people don't know about us. So as I said, you know, our North America headquarters is here in Apple Valley. Uponor started in the US in 1990, and actually we started as a company called Versbo, which is a Swedish company. So we started as a Swedish company, and we came here for heating. We were a radiant heating company. And then over the last 30 years, we've turned into a 90% plumbing company, 10% heating company. A lot of that actually has to do with code changes. And that's something I'll talk a little bit about in my presentation, which is when we talk about adopting sustainable technologies and building practices and changes, you know, one of the, I don't want to say limitations, but one of the things that will enable our pace or slow that pace is the adoption of new codes. And that can be a complicated, sometimes highly political process, and doesn't necessarily happen fast. But when we came to North America, we recognized the opportunity for our product to be used in plumbing as well as in underfloor heating, and we worked on some code changes and spec changes, and now it's actually used in 45% of new home construction. So it's kind of completely changed in the last 30 years. As far as size of North America, we're about $600 million in revenue, 1,000 employees, and we manufacture 1/3 of the PEX tubing sold in North America. We are specifically dominant in PEX A, which is the high end of PEX. I'll explain what PEX is in a little bit, and we actually have 65% in the PEX A market. In Q4, we're now acquired by a Swiss company. So we've been Swedish, we've been Finnish, we've been Swiss. As Steve said, you know, though we do have really strong connections to Finland, because that was our kind of home headquarters for a very long time, and so we do tend to get very involved with local Finnish ambassadors or ambassadors coming to the US from Finland. And a lot of people in Finland and Sweden who still work for the company over there, they joke that the reason that they landed in Minnesota is because it looked exactly like Sweden and Finland. And having been to both of those countries, I can say that I can see how that happened. George Fisher is a really large company that does also piping, we'll say, flow solutions. They're a lot more on the utilities, gas. They do some high precision machining. And so we were really kind of a nice complement to them, being more in the residential and commercial construction space. And the most amazing thing about this acquisition has been the shared culture, the shared values. They're also very sustainability focused. I would say they're actually ahead of where Uponor is. And so that's an exciting opportunity to accelerate our initiatives internally even faster. So what is PEX piping? PEX stands for cross-linked polyethylene. And it's basically a special kind of technology that allows the pipe to expand and contract. And the reason that's important is because every time there's a connection where you connect one pipe to the next, that's called a fitting. And that is an opportunity for a leak. And the average home leaks 10 gallons of water a year. And so what is different about PEX is that when it expands, you can expand it, and then you put the fitting in, and then it contracts. And it's like an airtight seal. There is nothing more airtight than that. Whereas when you're dealing with metallics or other plastic pipes that don't do this, there's usually like a crimp or a screw. And over time, as the building settles or things move around, that will loosen a little bit. And so those are more prone to leaks than this type of piping is. So that's really, I mean, and a lot of it comes down to also, we're big on labor savings because we're in the construction market, right? And we all know that there's a huge shortage for skilled trades. And so that's something that we're always focused on. How do we make this faster? How do we make this better? And so to plumb a house with copper takes 7 days. To plumb a house with PEX takes 2 to 3 days. So it's a big difference. And then when you even compare that, the cost, right, and affordability. So we have a lot of things that kind of come together with our product in terms of how it benefits the construction industry, both with affordability, helping them be a lot more strategic with how they use their labor. And then obviously water conservation and water quality is a big part of what we think about and the kind of products we bring forward. And I'll talk about that when we get to our product section. So how is it used? I've talked a lot about plumbing, but it's used in multiple applications. So plumbing, fire safety, radiant heating and cooling is a very large use for PEX in Europe and somewhat here. Radiant heating and cooling is 30% more efficient than forced air. So this is, again, an opportunity for us in the US to start to adopt these technologies more broadly that are more energy efficient. But what we really deal with in this space is just what people are used to, what they're comfortable with, and they're comfortable with forced air systems here in North America. Hydronic distribution, which is just really water before it becomes drinking water, coming into the building, moving through the building, and moving into your sink, your toilet, your shower. And then energy transport. So when you think about what we do, we don't do the big municipal piping. We do that in the Nordics, and that's the only place where we have a business for that. Beyond that, it's really from the street, connecting the water from the street to your house and inside your home. Sustainability is part of our core. I think I just tend to think people in Minnesota are a little bit more sustainability minded, but I also think this is a heavy European influence in our company. This has been a long-standing part of who we are and how we think about ourselves. So innovation and sustainability going hand in hand. We look at that through not only conserving water, but how does our culture support that? How do our people support that? How do we invest in sustainability experts and scientists? And then looking at protecting and reusing resources. We have We have a pipe based on fully recyclable resin, and then acting for the climate and how we get involved in the community. Some of our products to highlight is our EcoFlex. This is tubing that will go from maybe the street to the building. And this is used often as an alternative to stainless steel. And so it retains 60% more heat than stainless steel does. We just launched in the last couple years, this is in Europe, called Uponor Blue, and it's made from recyclable resin. Now, this can't be used in drinking water applications because drinking water pipe has to be 100% virgin resin, but this is great for underfloor heating. And as we think about how sustainability will get adopted in the world, the reason we actually don't have this in North America is because we don't have a large enough supply chain of recycled resin, right? So I think as we think about products and what goes into bringing sustainability into the world, I think there's a whole infrastructure that is getting built and still needs to get built to enable some of this. The Aquaport is actually a really interesting story. This is a technology that I actually had to write this down so I don't mess it up. But we will be the first to market with this in the US. This is not in code in the US, it is in Europe. It's a proven technology in Europe. We are about to put our first Aquaport in a multifamily building in Wisconsin. To get in code, you have to do an installation, which is kind of weird because it's not in code to do the installation. So we've gotten a reprieve from the state of Wisconsin, this is how it always works, to put this in this multifamily unit. And what it does is it actually localizes the hot water, heating that hot water and converting it from hydronic to drinking water. And so it'll localize it at the source. And what that does two things. It improves drinking water quality because traditionally it's kind of localized down in the bottom of the building and then sent up to the different apartments and what have you. And the longer hot water stays in a pipe, the more there's an opportunity for bacteria to grow. So the more you can shorten that distance, the less likelihood you're going to have for bacteria growth. So it does that locally, and then it's an energy reduction because you're just heating it where it's needed versus heating water that may not be needed and moving it through the building. So it's a 50% reduction in energy. So that's an example of where we're bringing something that exists and is used elsewhere in the world to North America, and a lot of that is working through codes. And then radiant systems. So like I said, this is 30% more energy efficient than forced air systems. Our challenge with adoption in the US, we have a high adoption in Midwest, Northeast, and Canada, but really the challenge with adoption is cost, because typically, because there is a preference for forced air, people still prefer forced air conditioning and then radiant heating, so then you have two systems. The Inflation Reduction Act is actually going to be our path to lowering this barrier, because as part of the Inflation Reduction Act, there's now eligibility for credits, right? For these people for developers to get credits for installing these systems, and in some cases it can almost completely pay for a system. So talking about government funding and willing to invest, that's where a lot of these initiatives are really important to drive adoption and change in behavior. So as I said, we're the first to manufacture PEX pipe from 100% chemically recycled materials. This is in Europe. We're looking at what does that supply chain look like and how do we bring this to North America. But this is a big deal because obviously being in plastics is, plastics are not always great and they're kind of controversial. But the hard thing about this is copper is also a precious resource and not also a great solution. And so we're trying to really do the best we can with the product that we're offering and figuring out how can we continue to make this more sustainable, recognizing that there's really not a perfect opportunity in this space for the type of material they use in plumbing. This is just kind of shows the extensiveness. When we think about sustainability, we don't just necessarily think about sustainability and climate change in the earth. We think about We think more holistically in terms of how are we bringing in the right mindset, the right talent, how are we looking at our internal sustainability? So our goal is to be 100% renewable energy driven by our factories. Right now we're 97%. So this involves things like looking at geothermal and making rather large investments to get us there. And so looking forward at the global trends, a lot of this is, we see this in North America and Europe. There's just more and more focus on sustainability, on energy, and not just from a climate perspective, but now it's becoming a cost issue. Especially in the US, we'll see this as there's more and more electrification and more reliance on the grid. Electricity is just going to continue to become more and more expensive. So figuring out how to use less of that is becoming more top of mind for people. When we talk to builders, really for them, they are concerned about climate change. A lot of times people think, oh, okay, this is a slow industry. They're not wanting to adapt to change. They're concerned about it. I think oftentimes they just don't know what to do about it. It feels like such a big problem to them, and at the end of the day, they're driven by timelines. They're driven heavily by cost, and so it's kind of like, how do they do that and still meet the deadlines, still meet the costs? And so a lot of what we work on, like I said, PEX is a lot faster to install, but we also work on, well, how can we prefab this and pre-assemble part of this at our site and send it to you? So it's even faster, and you're using less waste. Right, you're not going to have material scrap because we're sending you what you need, less packaging, right? So how do we make this a full offering that benefits their business and is something that we can contribute? So as Steve said, my role is part global. I was in Europe last week, traveling around to Germany, Netherlands, Sweden, and Spain to see how installations are done. And what was interesting to me is there's definitely different installation techniques. So in Spain, they install plumbing on the ceiling because they don't want leaks to go into the unit below. And they don't, in Germany, they don't use a lot of plywood. So this is at a daycare, and as you can see, it's kind of a ceramic wall. So there's definitely differences. There's different materials used, there's different ways of building, but their challenges are the same. Everybody's concentrated on labor. Everybody's concentrated on cost. Everybody's concentrated on energy consumption. And then how do I do that sustainably? So it's really just kind of eye-opening to see that, like, macro around the world, we're kind of developing, we're kind of battling the same issues, and how can we work together and learn from each other. Europe is very far ahead when it comes to energy innovation because they've built it, it's been a part of their society for so long. But I would say what happens and what I observe in North America is our scale makes it easier to adapt. So maybe it takes a while to get into a code, but like once that happens, it moves pretty quickly. Whereas in Europe, there still is a little bit of differences country by country. And we do have that in the US where there's differences state by state. But I think we're more willing to adopt codes across states if we see something being successful. So there's a lot to learn from each other in terms of how do we influence codes, how do we drive that adoption, and what technologies are working. For example, actually Europe hasn't adopted PEX in plumbing as broadly as we have. They've been a lot slower to adopt that. And so that's something that we're working with them on is, how do you explain the benefit of this? Because a lot of it is labor, a lot of it is leaks. And if you don't talk about that, then it just seems like a plastic commodity, right? And that's a hard conversation to have. Roadmap to 2027. There's a lot of bullets that go into each of these, so I'll just talk a little bit about what we're doing in each one. But maximizing positive impact, this goes to employees, customers, but also our products. So our goal by 2027 is for 90% of our product sales to have environmental product declarations associated with them, and for 50% of our portfolio to have a sustainable alternative or be a sustainable alternative. So we have some really aggressive goals that we're driving through our research and development group and our product management group. From minimizing environmental impact, like most companies, we have scope 1, 2, 3 targets, but we're also looking at 100% green electricity. Like we've gone as far as we can, kind of working with Excel on what we have, and now it's like that last 3% is that final stretch that's going to be a lot of work, and that's where we're looking at just new technologies we have to invest in for our operations. And then governance. This one I like a lot because I think this is how change really really can happen in a company. But senior management, we have ESG incentives in our compensation plan, or ESG targets in our compensation plan. And that is really to make it real, right? To not just have it be something that's separate or that is like a nice to have, but as things get busy, it gets deprioritized, but it is linked to our incentive programs. And I know that's kind of like a little dirty part of corporate America, the how do people get paid and motivated, but I do think it's important that how people get paid and motivated really align with the right things, and you don't actually see that very often, right? You see a lot of talk about it, but when it comes down to it, it's not always there. So that's something I'm personally proud that we've done, and I think that shows the company's commitment to it and serious commitment to it. So that was a lot in a short amount of time. Any questions?
Can we thank Anna?
Yeah.
Anna, you used the word holistic. I really appreciated that because it's a reminder we shouldn't think of water in isolation. Water goes through plastic pipes, and they're recycling that. And I also, let's see, Bjorgvin, you're still here yet. I just wanted to put in a quick plug for Bjorgvin because when I think of the word holistic, I think of Bjorgvin because there's nobody in Minnesota who appreciates the broader concept of circularity and holistic thinking on this. So have a word with Bjorgvin today if you want to talk holistic too. So, okay, plug over. Back to Anna. Who has questions for Anna? Martin. Here, I'll give you the...
Well, great talk. By the way, we do also have ESG incentive in our compensation.
Yeah.
Which is, I like you said, I don't see often.
Yeah.
Code acceptance, like what's the duration state per state? Like what's the delay? And what are the main hurdles?
Yeah.
Is it a big expense? I know codes in Canada. I've never gone through that process in the States. It could be 5 years easy.
It's 5 to 7 years to get a code change. It's not. So we're actually not in code in New York City, right? They require copper, and so we've been working on changing this at least for 4 years now, and we're still probably in the middle of it. And that process involves working with the committees, getting approval to do some projects, and this is the part where it gets complex because a lot of people that sit on this codes committee, they're in the pipe fitters union, which means they install copper, right? And so it does get, not to say that's the reason that we're having hurdles, but it starts to get really sticky in terms of like how you build relationships and also prove out like, hey, we actually think this is the right thing to do. So. And
you said you didn't have, it was not as accepted in Europe. You meant France, probably?
France, Spain, and Sweden.
And they don't produce PEX in France.
No. Yeah, we do produce it in Sweden. And,
I know.
Yeah.
But they have the same phenomenon.
Yeah.
And it's Saint-Gobain who controls.
Yeah.
For Anna? Very good. Go ahead, Mark.
I'm interested if you've had the kind of pushback on ESG that in some states have made the use of it illegal. Have you experienced that, or Martin? And if so, what are you doing to push back on the attack on ESG, SDGs, DEI, you name it, But all over the country, there's an assault.
Yeah, I think because we're mostly in Minnesota, you know, and we have salespeople around the country, so we do have people around the country and we're selling around the country. We don't have a lot of employee pushback. And then I also believe people just don't really know who we are. We're not a big name in North America, so we kind of fly under the radar. Like, plumbers know us. I will say we have a fanatic following with plumbers. There's a plumber who's tattooed our name on his back, right? It's like nothing I've ever seen before as a marketing person, honestly. But like, we're not in the crosshairs because, you know, we're not a big name here, even though we are a big presence here. And so I do think in those cases, name recognition makes companies a bigger target. So, and also because we're European, I hate to say it this way, but the Europeans just don't care. Like, so, you know, they kind of let us do what we want to do. And so that's been really, really a positive thing for us. So.
Another question for Anna? Brett?
Brett Cummings with PCL Construction, so obviously I'm very familiar
Yeah.
with you and your product.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the PEX Blue and the recycled end of that material, if that's something that you potentially see getting traction in the U.S., and what that might look like and what the hurdles might be. And I guess with that, if there's anything that, you know, as a large-scale builder, we're always looking to drive sustainability. So is there anything that we can do on our end to, you know, help with any of that?
Yeah. Honestly, the hurdle in the U.S. with PEX Blue is we don't have the resin supply chain to have enough resin to be able to produce that pipe and offer it here. So that's something we're continuously working on with our resin suppliers, because we are, you know, very focused on bringing that here. I would say from a builder perspective, you know, what can you do? I think a lot of it is just openness to new process, new ways of doing things. We find some builders they come to us and they want us to work with them because they, you know, KB Homes is one that really is focused on sustainability. And then we find some builders are, you know, they have their process, it's working, it's down. And I totally respect both of those scenarios. But I think as a builder, don't feel odd coming to the manufacturer, because I know you buy through distributors, right? And so it's kind of end arounding there, but coming to us and working with us, you can still buy, you know, you can still buy from your distributor, but we help us build out products that help you meet your goals. So.
Any other questions? If not, Todd?
As long as tattoos don't have to come with the Uponor products, I think it's okay. You know,
Yeah.
that would be tough. This is a comment more than a question. About 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we used to have discussions as a water roundtable on the idea about the fact that Minnesota, this was one of the few issues that basically combined both local and international issues, both in terms of companies and the issue itself of water, because one of the things about programs like today, it shows you that it hits almost every aspect of life. And that we had the opportunity and we were moving toward it when actually we had a state trade department, which appears to have disappeared in some ways. But that we had a chance to create Minnesota as one of the international centers for water. And one of the things, and this is not a planned thing, Phil, and I'm not trying to suggest, I'm suggesting something here, that one of the functions of Global Minnesota is not just as a convener of things like this, but conveners of programs that can be a strong economic base that others aren't doing. And I think water can do that. And programs like Kurt's and some of the others that are active in this, I think, have a base both ideologically and the idea of economically, of the idea of a great opportunity for both the state and for global. You know, and I would hope, in fact, I'm not suggesting that we allow Steve Rydell to do what God intended him to do, you know, which is what he basically loved doing and provided the center for this in the state. You know, and maybe a return to that from programs like this and on basic issues that tie us together would be a great growth function and a great service function for the state of Minnesota. And I also want to say thank you to Global for doing a program like this.
Yeah. Good.
Thank you, Todd.
All right.
I think we'll be doing another one of these.
Yeah.
This was great. So can we thank Anna one more time?
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant job, Anna. Oh, I went too fast. Let's see. Did I get that right? There we go. All right. We are in wind down mode because I want to give you folks a chance to network too. So I just have this one slide, then Phil's going to share a little bit about upcoming events, but I just wanted to touch back on what is World Water Day, because I hadn't really asked the question myself. And Heather mentioned a little bit about it and what it means to Cargill, but basically it's to highlight our fresh water. You know, we've got a lot more salt water than we do fresh water on the planet. And if we want to take salt water and turn it into drinking water, it's really expensive. Not too many places do it. A few do, but we don't want to do that if we don't have to. And we want to raise awareness of the fact that a lot of people don't have fresh drinking water availability. 2.2 billion struck me as really high. If that's correct, that's kind of scary. And then finally, water can be a political issue. Sometimes it touches borders. And I'm reminded of that because Carl and his team at the Council of Canada gave us the privilege of meeting a member of the Canadian Parliament who was looking at cross-border water issues. We kind of take it for granted, but we share the Great Lakes as a border. We've got the St. Lawrence Seaway. We've got rivers that go back and forth across our border. And luckily, the United States and Canada get along. So we talk about these things. But there's places on planet Earth that don't get along as well as the United States and Canada, and you can think of a few. So this is also an occasion to say, you know, water needs to rise above politics. We need to share water. It's pretty basic stuff. So these are things to reflect on because tomorrow's World Water Day. So that's what I have to share today. I'm really looking forward to networking with folks, but before we break up and go into networking, we have a few upcoming events to share about Global Minnesota, and then we'll give Katie Clark-Sieben the last word today.
Why don't you keep that on? Oh, very good. Great. Thanks. Yeah, terrific. Thank you, everyone. Wonderful, excellent presentations today. There was a quote from the UN that said, water is critical for sustainable development, including environmental integrity and the alleviation of poverty and hunger. It is indispensable for human health and well-being. I think that really came through in the presentations today from the wonderful presenters from Cargill, from Uponor, and from Ultrasonex, and we're very thankful to them. Let's give them another round of applause for the excellent program that they provided for us today. On a guy who had a little more economy of words, but maybe prophetic for all of us too, was Mr. Benjamin Franklin, who said, when the well is dry, we'll know the worth of water. And I think that's something that we're all trying to make sure we don't get to that point. But there are parts of the world, as we've heard, that are much more stressed this way. And I think the efforts that these companies and others are doing are vital to our success around the world. A couple things coming up for us. We'd just like to give you be ashamed not to tell you what else you can maybe, whoops, I think I got ahead one. Can I go back one there? I think, there we go. So we have a global social coming up. We'd love to have you guys join us. Really interesting right now. We have a group of young leaders from the Americas Initiative, the YLI Initiative here. These are young entrepreneurs from the Caribbean and South America primarily that are here embedded in Minnesota companies for a month, getting the exposure and experience in these green technology companies. But they're here to learn and then take that back to their home countries and to their home businesses. And we're going to do a social event where you can come and actually interact with them and learn about and hear more about the work that they're doing. So we hope you'll come join us for that very interesting event. We also have strategic alliances, a discussion between on Belarus and Europe. We have a very fascinating speaker, Ambassador Sannikov, who was the deputy foreign minister of Belarus, who's now a prominent opposition leader living in exile. So he's going to come and talk to us a little bit about the relationship between Belarus and Europe, Belarus and Russia, and kind of where things stand in that regard. And then finally, we have a program on our gala. So it's not really a program. Hope you guys come. Come Sail Away is the theme this year. We got 5 port cities. We got food from all 5 port cities. We're going to be featuring entertainment, activities. It's a lot of fun. It's a way to support the work of Global Minnesota, but it's also really a great engagement opportunity to connect with many others from around our state that are very engaged in all things international and really care about advancing global understanding and global engagement. So we hope you'll come sail away with us at the, what was that for a thematic? Come sail away with us at the Global Gala as well. Lastly for me, just to say thank you again to our great friends here at Cargill. I think the unsung hero today is JB, who kept all the technology working correctly for us throughout the program and was instrumental in helping put this together. And of course, Katie Clark-Sieben and the team here, who are just such wonderful partners when we talk about the complexity of delivering programs like this and the virtue of continuing programs like this. It requires great partners to make it happen, and Cargill's been a tremendous partner for us. So again, huge thanks to everybody. Lastly, let's just say one more round of applause and thanks to Steve Riedel and the Global Minnesota team that worked hard to put this together today. A lot of effort went into making sure you had a really robust and good program. So a big round of applause to Steve and to the Cargill folks for their work. And I think I invite Katie back up to give the last word.
Well, I will be brief, as I know there's many interesting networking conversations to happen. But just to officially wrap up today, and with that Come Sail Away theme, I can't help but think of Styx's song, Come Sail Away. I hope you're going to be playing that at the event this year. Okay. So I certainly learned a lot today. So thank you to our presenters. Some key themes that I heard. I loved the saying, water is a team sport. All actors need to come together to drive solutions. One industry can't do this alone. One sector can't do this alone. It requires all of us. Second, innovation at the hyper-local level is key, whether that's residential, whether that's individual watersheds. That action at that level is what will allow for scalable change and impact. Third, the future is already here. The demand is now, the need is now. The need for action to innovate and implement new solutions is today, and we can't wait. So I think your suggestion to get Steve Riedel's Water Roundtable back up and going was an excellent one, because I remember those roundtable discussions. So thank you to our Aqua Heroes, our presenters today, our Aquaman, Steve Riedel. Thank you to JB and the entire Global Minnesota team for hosting us today. Fantastic presentation.